Well, howdy, y'all. Welcome to Uncivil Law. And for today's case, we are discussing an ongoing situation with the federal government versus state government in Oregon. Yes, the federal government has been detaining slash arresting people in courthouses or near courthouses. And there's been some truly wonderful videos of this happen. People come up and try to arrest them as protesters say, use your words. And the police are like saying to themselves quietly, because they don't say anything, but saying to themselves, no. So the Oregon Attorney General, the highest law enforcement officer in the state of Oregon, is saying no. Our citizens should be allowed to do this in Portland. They should be allowed to beat people's heads in, and they should be allowed to throw things around, and they shouldn't be detained by federal authorities. And the federal government, right about this time, is saying to them, "What are you talking about?" You know, I take note here that the Attorney General of Oregon is a woman, and I'm a man. But that being the case, I'm still going to law explain to the Oregon Attorney General. Yes, I'm going to law explain because you don't seem to know how law works, but let's discuss this case and this ongoing thing that's happening. Wow, this is a thing that's occurring. And I do love this first line right off the bat. Elizabeth Rosenblum is the Attorney General for the state of Oregon and has the power to appear for Oregon and its agencies pursuant to law and common law, and for its citizens, this is my favorite part, for its citizens under the doctrine of parens parete. Okay, so you probably don't know what that means. That's okay. You might have heard of the phrase in loco parentis. So basically, that's where, well, you know what a parent is, right? That's basically a guardian. It's another name for guardian, but it's a natural guardian, so we call him a parent. And that's the same language, right? So it's a guardianship. So when you're in loco parentis, you act as though you were the parent. And here, when you say under the doctrine of parens parete, basically that is saying the parent of the people or the parent of the population. So basically, she is saying, I am everyone's mother. That's what that phrase means. Ellen Rosenblum says, I am the mother of every citizen in the state of Oregon. They are all my children, and I am here to protect them. Okay, well, you shine on, Ellen, as parent of people who cannot protect themselves. They parent for all the citizens of Oregon. You shine on. All right, so this Attorney General, who is the highest law enforcement official in the state, would like to sue some various people in the federal government. So who are we suing the federal government? Let's find out. So we're suing first, among other people, the United States Marshal Service. Who is the United States Marshal Service? Who are the marshals? Well, they are the police for the courthouse. If you ever go into a federal courthouse, they're the ones that do the screening and stuff, and they're also the one that executes orders of courts and stuff, and they're badass. So don't mess with the marshals. The United States Marshal Office is an agency within the control of the Department of Justice. According to the fact sheet, it is the enforcement arm of the federal courts involved in every major federal law enforcement initiative. Probably true, because they're the ones that enforce court orders. They're the ones that help chase down fugitive suspects. You know, we all remember that from Tommy Lee Jones, right? So yeah, the marshals, that's them. We also have the Federal Protective Service. It's an agency within the Department of Homeland Security. Its mission is to prevent, protect, respond to, and recover from terrorism, criminal acts, and other hazards threatening the United States government's critical infrastructure, services, and the people who provide them, such as federal buildings. So the Federal Protective Service's job is to protect federal buildings. So yeah, they have an interest in this. So this is who we're suing. Great. So now that we are trying to sue the federal government, what exactly are we trying to sue them for? What did the federal government do, and how hard should I laugh about it? Let's find out. On information and belief, federal law enforcement officers, including John Does 1 through 10, have been using unmarked vehicles to drive in downtown Portland, detain protesters, and place them in unmarked vehicles, removing them from public without either arresting them or stating the basis of arrest since at least Tuesday, July 14th. You know, I just want to be like pot, meet kettle, you know, because this is stuff that the state government routinely does, I am quite sure. I am quite sure the state police and the city of Portland police and other authorities within the state of Washington and Oregon, that these authorities, they move around in unmarked cars. And they do raids with just minimal police badging. So it's like, oh, I'm pointing the finger at you, but I'm just pointing 3 back at myself because I do this all the time. So it's like, yeah, they're in unmarked vans and they're detaining people without stating the basis of arrest, which they're not required to do by law. I think the Attorney General might be confusing the real legal world with the TV world. And it's not uncommon for police to announce to you why they're arresting you, but they don't have to. They don't have to tell you why they're arresting you. So, yeah, that's not a thing that they're required to do. In one widely reported incident in the early hours of Wednesday, July 15th, Mark Pettibone, I think he's the guy where everyone said, use your words. That was hilarious. The guy who was wearing riot gear, who was wearing a helmet. Why are you wearing riot gear? There's no riot here. And why are you wearing riot gear, Mark, with helmets and everything, right? Yeah, so Mark, who I'm pretty sure is this guy, alleged that he was confronted by armed men dressed in camouflage who took him off the street, pushed him to a van, and drove him downtown until unloading him in a building, which is believed to be a United States courthouse. Pettibone alleges that he was then put into his cells and read his Miranda rights, but he was not told why he was arrested, nor was he provided with a lawyer. He alleges he was released without any paperwork, citation, or record. Okay, yeah, so far, so good. We are well off of, this is totally fine procedurally. The police are not, this is another little bit of fiction from police procedurals. The police are not required to read you Miranda when they arrest you. They often do because it saves them down the line. So it's a thing they often do, but they don't have to. They don't have to read you Miranda. When does Miranda apply? When do they have to read you Miranda? They have to read you Miranda if two things are true. It's custodial interrogation. You have to be in custody, and they have to be asking you questions. These two things have to be true. So they don't have to read you Miranda if you're not under custody. So, for example, a police officer can just come up to any random person and just start asking them questions. And they don't have to read you Miranda because you're not under custody. You can leave at any time, right? So you have interrogation, but not custody. And the opposite is true. If you're in custody, but not interrogation. So if they arrest you, but they don't interrogate you, they don't have to read you Miranda. So why would they have to? Well, if it occurred in their presence and in their knowledge, they may not have to ask you any questions. If they're arresting you because of something they saw occur, they may not need to ask any questions. And so at some point later, they are like, okay, we might want to ask you questions. Now we're going to read you Miranda. And it's like, you have a right to this. Would you like to invoke us? And he said yes. And apparently they felt that they didn't have enough for whatever reason. And so they decided to let him go, which is, again, why you should invoke your rights, because most people will talk themselves into a conviction. They didn't have enough, or they wanted to let him go for other reasons, whatever. But yeah, they arrested him. They didn't tell him why. When they wanted to ask him questions, they read him Miranda. And then he said, no, I want to have my rights. And they said, okay, go forth. They didn't give him any paperwork. Okay. All right, fine. I'm sure that happened. That's something that your police probably do too in Oregon, if I had to guess. On information and belief, unidentified federal officers, including John Doe, have likewise detained other citizens off of our streets. Without warning or explanation, they're not required to warn you before arresting you. If they have cause to arrest you, they're not required to warn you. They're not required to explain you. Without a warrant, they're not required to have a warrant to arrest you, particularly if things occurred in their presence and in their knowledge. They're not arresting you in your home. The home is special. They can arrest you with probable cause, if they have probable cause with or without a warrant. And yeah, and no way of providing who's determining this action. There's no way of knowing, in the absence of the officers identifying themselves, whether or not United States Border Patrol is engaged in this action. So we're not sure who's doing it. They're not required to identify themselves. And again, if I had to guess, I guess Oregon State Police probably don't always identify themselves either. They just say police, and their badges said police. So they didn't even have to say it verbally. It's like, yeah, this is all fine. This is all stuff Oregon probably does on a fairly routine basis, if I had to guess. That's what makes this so comical to me. The Attorney General, who again is the highest law enforcement in the state of Oregon, you're probably well aware of the fact that your officers travel around in unmarked vehicles. Your officers enter homes, often when they shouldn't. They conduct arrests and detentions without necessarily stating the reason why, and without giving people Miranda, because they're not required to. All this thing is kind of routine. And the police are detaining people who are engaging in rioting and in wearing riot gear, as this person was. See, he came dressed for the party, so it's like, yeah, I can think of reasons we're probably detaining this guy. Maybe we didn't have enough, but to go any further, but we had enough to detain. Yeah, we're trying to protect federal property because Portland certainly isn't doing it for some reason. Oregonians have the right to walk through downtown Portland at night and early hours in the morning. Well, if that's true, Attorney General, you might want to look into the fact that your citizens cannot walk down the streets at night because the streets at night are unsafe because you are not enforcing the law. If your citizens truly enjoy the right to walk down the streets of Portland during the middle of the night, which I think that they do, you might want to look into enforcing law so that they can walk down the streets without fear of molestation, which is certainly not something that's going on right now because of the ongoing civil unrest, which has been going on for a month and a half. If your citizens truly enjoy this right, maybe you should be enforcing the law so citizens can walk down the streets without fear. Maybe you want to look at yourself on that one. Defendants are injuring the occupants of Portland by taking away the citizens' ability to determine whether they're being kidnapped by a militia or other malfeasance dressed in paramilitary gear, such as they may engage in self-defense, or are being arrested. And this is the part where I just like facepalm and laugh. I'm laughing so hard. Oh wait, you're serious. Let me laugh harder. Because again, this is the kind of thing that police do all the time. They wear paramilitary gear. And people can't necessarily tell if they're being arrested by the police or not, because we have these wonderful plainclothes, no-knock raids for some reason. That is a thing that happens. And so maybe you want to look at yourself on that one and some of the stuff your police are doing. So yeah, we can't tell if a person busts down my door, are they police or are they vigilantes? And how am I supposed to tell the difference? As I'm determining whether or not I have the right to self-defense. That's a good question. And maybe you want to look at yourself on that one, some of your police tactics of that. State law enforcement officers are not being consulted or coordinated with on these detentions. I am so sad for you. Let me show you how much I care. I do not care. They're not required to coordinate with you any more than you're required to cooperate with them. And these state authorities could expend unnecessary resources responding to reports of abduction when federal agents snatch people walking through downtown without explicit identification or explanation. Well, at 2 is on that one. Defendants' tactics violates the rights of all people to be detained without warrant or basis, and violate the state's sovereign interest in enforcing its laws and protecting people within its borders. Well, if you would actually do that, that would be great. Anytime you want to enforce your laws and protect the people within your borders, that would be just fine. If you would do that, that'd be great. But you're not doing that. And without serving any federal law enforcement purpose. Yeah, the purposes such as protecting federal buildings and federal assets, and federal courthouses and federal officers. Those are legitimate aspects of the federal government. And also, the federal government has an interest in preventing civil unrest at large and preventing terrorism at large. There are many, 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 many valid federal interests here. I don't have to think about them very hard. This whole lawsuit is a Hail Mary that has really no chance of going anywhere. It's mostly for PR purposes. I doubt they get any relief out of this. Although, again, it is the Ninth Circuit, and some of their judges are insane. So I don't know what trial judge is going to hear this, but maybe the judge is insane. And the Ninth Circuit on review, maybe they're insane. So maybe they will get some of this relief. I don't know, but they really shouldn't. Because the federal government has an interest in enforcing its laws, many of them. And it has an interest in ensuring the civic order. And for some reason, although you claim the right to, as a sovereign, to police your borders and enforce your laws, you're not doing it. And so the federal government has to come in and be like, well, I guess we have to stop the insurgency because you're not doing it for like a month and a half. All right, so we'd like some claims of relief. What would the city of Portland like? We'd like citizens peacefully gathering on the streets of Portland to protest racial inequality have the right to gather and express themselves. You know what? No problem. You have every right in this world to peacefully gather and protest literally anything you like. No problem. Yeah, that's great. Now, if that's what you were doing, that'd be one thing, but it's not anything like what you're doing because that is not exactly what's been going on in Portland. Yes, you have a right to protest. You are correct. If you want to stand outside the courthouse and protest the mean feds, go nuts. No problem. Your First Amendment is intact. Although, again, due to quarantine orders and stuff, maybe less intact than it was, but let's look past that. As far as the feds are concerned, you can do it. Defendants' actions are undertaken with the intent of discouraging lawful protest. Oh, that definitely seems like the thing that's happening. And therefore constitute illegal prior restraint on Oregonians to peacefully protest. Yeah, no, just no. That's not a thing that's happening. The federal government is not trying to interfere with your ability to peacefully protest. They are trying to make sure that your city has civic order and civility and society and laws, and also protect federal assets and so forth and so on, which you're not doing for some reason. And the federal government is stepping in and you're saying, oh, they're trying to interfere with our right to protest. Just no, that's not a thing that's happening. On the information and belief, defendants did not have a warrant to seize Pettibone or other citizens who have been detained and will continue to seize individuals off the streets without warrant. In the absence of an injunction and no exception to warrant requirement will justify those seizures. Wow, yeah, should we point out how hard it is to get an injunction on ongoing criminal proceedings? Should we point out how hard it is to get an injunction in a criminal proceeding and criminal arrest? Like, it's not impossible, but it's close. But yeah, we'd like an injunction stopping the mean police from from arresting our citizens. The Fifth Amendment prohibits federal officers from depriving a person of life, liberty, or process without due process of law. Yep, they're giving you due process, though, so no problem. Okay, this one's rich, too. This is nice and rich. Oregon citizens are at risk from kidnapping by militias and other citizen volunteers taking it on themselves to pull peaceful protesters in a car in a manner that resembles federal actions. And Oregon's own police agencies are therefore injured by roving federal officers. They're allowed to rove. They're not subject to your jurisdiction. Confusing citizens about what they're obligated to comply with, armed men or than unmarked vans. Again, this is not exactly a unique problem brought out by this situation. The police at large have been doing things like this for a very long time. The police move in unmarked vans sometimes. Sometimes they're unmarked. Sometimes they do things like this. And yes, this is just like pointing it back at you. So yes, they're roving federal officers. You're correct, because they're not subject to your jurisdiction. They're subject to national jurisdiction. So yes, they're roving. Yes, it's true that random people might do this. And if they do, those people can be prosecuted because those people are not law enforcement officers. And also that would be terrorism, which the federal government would have every interest in enforcing. And this is not a problem that's brought up by this situation. Anyone at any time could do this. And, for what it's worth, I've at least heard of home burglaries and home invasions where people dress up as police or police-like gear and yell police as they're doing the home invasion, which isn't the worst idea because, how can you tell the difference? So again, this is one finger point at you, three fingers pointed back at me kind of a thing. The Attorney General would like the following: a declaration that the tactics described in this violate the right to gather protests for fear of being voted in a van by anonymous agents. No. A declaration that the tactics described in this violate the Fourth and Fifth Amendments of state citizens. Wow. Are we doing a whole sovereign citizen thing? Has the Attorney General of Oregon gone sovereign citizen? Because this is sovereign citizen language a little bit, right? They're talking about the rights of state citizens, as though state citizens and federal citizens were distinct concepts. Has the Attorney General of Oregon become a sovereign citizen? So they're only state citizens, and that's why you don't have authority over me, because they're only state citizens? Okay, Attorney General of Oregon, great. Violating the right of our state citizens, that's unlawful for federal law enforcement to pull people off the streets without probable cause using unmarked vehicles. No, you're not going to get that. Injunction permanently restraining them from engaging in tactics. No. Requiring them to identify themselves in their agency. Maybe if they're feeling really generous, you might get that. Yes, this is at least the agency. You might get that much. Explain to any person or show credentials, maybe. Explain to any person detained that the person is being detained or arrested. You don't need to explain it when it's obvious. You don't need to explain the obvious. I don't like this. It's you need to explain to the person they're being detained or arrested. When they're being detained or arrested, it's so obviously clear that you don't need to explain it. Am I being arrested? Am I being detained? Well, let's see. Yes. Yes, you are. But we want it to be explained to us. That's good. No, probably not. And not arrest individuals without probable cause or warrant. Such other relief as may be proper. Sincerely, the Attorney General of Oregon. That's great. So this is in absolutely no sense of the word the end of our coverage of this case, because we're going to be covering this because it's good for the lulz. This is the case of Ellen Rosenblum versus the United States of America. And the Attorney General of Oregon says, you're enforcing the law and you're not allowed to do that. And the U.S. government's response is going to mostly be, because we absolutely do have the right to do this. So we have the right to protect federal buildings. We have a right to protect federal assets. And we also have the right to arrest leaders of insurrections because it's against federal law. And so we're detaining people as part of our police process. And I don't see a court issuing any of these injunctions really. Maybe if they're feeling really generous, maybe, yes, here's my agency. Maybe that, or maybe a name. That's about as far as this is going to go. Because I don't think, and I know this is stretching, but I don't think district courts are that insane, even in Oregon, that they would do this. So I think the federal government has every right to this, but we will definitely be covering more of it. But at least for now, this is the end of the coverage of this ongoing, whatever this is.